Hey, everybody, this is Paul Harrison, President of Agriculture Advocates. My good friend and colleague, Adam Cornish here. It's Tuesday, April 21st, and we wanted to talk about a few different topics. But Adam, let me throw it over to you to get us started.
Thanks, Paul. I'm a little behind the eight ball on this, but April 1st this year, Peru came out with a framework for actually regulating genome edited products. And this is super exciting. Keep it short.
It is,
Peru
isn't it?
has been a staunch anti GMO country for a long time. When we actually met with them for APEC back in 2024, they were doing their best to have effective conversations about GMOs, biotechnology with us, but it was real hard for them. But I think maybe partially from those conversations, they recognize the need to be at level with a variety of countries on genome edited products. And you and I have talked about genome editing a lot in the past. Very
Absolutely.
simply, one of the things that can be done with it is taking products and speeding up processes of natural selection, right? So you don't have to do 20, 30, 40 crosses to get to a trait that you really want in your optimized cultivar. You can make a targeted change and boom, voila, you've got your happy little potato or tomato or corn. Um, and a lot of countries, they're taking their own approaches on it, but some of them are exempting those from regulatory processes because at the end of the day, the crop could have been produced through natural breeding or selective breeding. So they're like, we wouldn't regulate the bred variety. Why should we do it the genome edited version? So I haven't dug deep into it. I think a lot of the documents are actually in Spanish, but it seems that they at least have an approach for evaluating genome edited crops, and I think that's a big win. So very excited about that. Congratulations, Peru. You look like you have something to say, sir.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say. I mean, I think that's a really positive development, especially given their traditional opposition to genome edited products. But I guess for them, that opens up not just the possibility of like buying, U.S. corn or something, that is genome edited, but also I guess their farmers could then grow crops like specialty crops for
Mm-hmm.
export. I always think about like pairwise and their seedless thornless blackberry,
Mm-hmm.
or tomatoes, but they could, U.S. companies could go invest in Peru. And let's
Mm-hmm.
be honest, you already see in the grocery store lots of fruits and vegetables coming from Peru. All the
Mm-hmm.
especially berries. When you look closely at the labeling on the box, so this would just be another opportunity for them to, for U.S. companies to work down there and find partners, grow crops, and then export them to the United States or other markets. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be clear. I see this as just a net positive for everyone. So, yes, the U.S. can work with farmers, distributors, developers in Peru to bring them seeds, help them refine seeds that they already have in the country, import our crops, take their crops on our own end. But I mean, the options are expanded greatly at this point. And so Peruvian research firms can be developing Peruvian crops for Peruvian people. Because let's note, there are crops down there that we just don't eat up here, and yet they're essential staples for the people of the country. So yes, this is an opportunity for U.S. collaboration, and also just a big win for farmers in Peru as a whole. So
Cool.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm super excited about it. Would love to see where they go with this. But let's get back into other topics. Last week
Yeah. What else?
we had a conversation about the Strait of Hormuz, and we're like, "Hooray, it's open!" We're not going to see effects right away, but you know, hopefully, we'll see a shift in the positive direction for our farmers. And then the very next day, before we even had a chance to post the episode, what happened, sir?
Yeah. So I mean, they are, Iranians military at least is now saying, "Oh, it's closed again." So, you know, with Hormuz, this is an example. The U.S. we have our leverage. The Iranians also have leverage, right? And neither side is going to buckle to the other and admit, that the other side has leverage or has more leverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, the president loves to have leverage, try to find new leverage, preserve it. Same thing with the Iranians, right? It's just really clear geography is provides a certain amount of leverage for them, right? Um, and I'll go back to something I think president said a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, right? Oh, we got like 90% of their launchers. That's great, but we didn't get them all. And so that's a problem, right? And that is a problem, right? As long as they can launch anything, it's a threat. As long as they can put a mine out there, it's a threat, right? And they're glad to use that leverage. And at the end of the day, right, it's going to get down to, can we tolerate $5 gas longer than the Iranians can tolerate being bombed if it gets back to kinetics? Don't know, right? But this is one of those situations where, each side gets a vote and a voice in how things come out. We're not going to, it's not a situation where we get to just dictate to them. And so I think folks need to realize that, and this is just a good example, right? The Iranian military said, oh, it's closed. So now it's closed. But everybody's kind of hopeful that talks are going to continue in Pakistan. I don't think either side really wants to get back to the kinetic side of things. So maybe a lot of talk. As Winston Churchill would say, jaw, which is better than war, right? But we'll have to see.
Yeah,
and that's going to be a constant refrain on this.
And I think it's important that who can bear the pain the most. And you put it in terms of dollars at the pump, but I'm thinking about it from just the area we were talking about before, which is like fertilizer and others. And we'll be talking about fertilizer a little bit more later. We talked about it in the past. It's going to be a continued topic, but as long as the strait is shut down, fertilizer is going to be restricted. And let's note, the U.S. wouldn't be getting a whole lot of that anyway because of our tariffs on Russia and Morocco. But this is also impacting the rest of the world. Like from a world standpoint, most of Africa and other countries are actually super dependent on the fertilizer that comes through that strait. And if they can't afford it, they can't afford the little bit that's coming through. And there's analyses coming out of the UN right now that's saying that if they miss this planting season, which we're right in the middle of right now, we're gonna see hunger and prices on food go up throughout the next year. Then bringing it home to the U.S., 70% of farmers actually reported in an American Farm Bureau Federation survey saying that they wouldn't be able to buy all of the fertilizer that they need this year just because they don't have the prices are just too high. The current estimates are that the prices are up 39% for anhydrous ammonia, compared to last year. That's ridiculous. And
prices haven't really come back down from the Ukraine-Russia war spike, right? I mean, they came down a good bit, but they're still elevated from what they were before that conflict.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that is fascinating, I saw some reporting on it the other day, is that even though prices are up in the United States, and like you said, farmers, 70% of farmers saying they're not going to be able to get all they need. It's still lower in the United States than it is on the global stage. In cases by $100 a ton, and so especially out in New Orleans, where a lot of this trade happens, they are, people are playing the arbitrage trade and buying U.S. fertilizer and exporting it, which means there'll be less domestically, right? But you make your profit by shipping it somewhere else, selling it there because the price is $100 a ton more, right? Or maybe it's even more. So it works out, and that's how a free-flowing capitalist trade system works, right? But that's just not good for us. So that is how it impacts us, right? We're not as dependent on it, but even though we're not, we bear the consequences because other places that are make it more attractive to export fertilizer than sell it here or raise the prices here, right? So there is no winning on this one, right?
Yeah. As supply goes down, our demand's getting higher, and interesting schemes are getting put in place, and farmers are the ones that are taking the brunt of it. And really, at the end of the day, this is, I'll be the bad guy and say this is all an ego trip from the administration. Like the tariffs and the strait being shut down is really their fault at the end of the day. And I think
they're all choices freely made, right?
Yeah. And so
and you can see how it plays out.
Yeah. I'll just say every day that the strait is closed sets our farmers back by weeks. And so there needs to be action on this soon, in my opinion.
Yeah. I thought the other interesting thing I saw on all the discussion about the impact of fertilizer loss and declining usage in, other parts of the world was drawing the same parallel to the Russia-Ukraine war and the impacts there, which were very comparable, right?
Hmm.
Different cause, but comparable results. It's like a 20% decrease in food supply, right? And I think we're looking at, I think the calculations I saw were, I don't know, it's 20 billion or so pounds of grain, which is like, a lot of grain per person,
Hmm.
just won't be grown this year. So that results, and it won't impact the United States,
No.
right? We won't starve. Um, we'll pay higher prices for things, but we'll be okay, right? But other places really will. In a place
Hmm.
like Madagascar, where there's already stunting, there'll be even more because there just won't be food. So
Well, let's point out you and I aren't going to starve, but people that we have poverty in America. We have we have malnourished in America. My husband
we do.
runs a community food pantry, and every week people come in and they get the barest of necessities so they can survive week to week. Um, as we see food prices go up here in the U.S., we're only going to see the need for those food banks and pantries go up. So yeah, you're right. You and I are probably going to be fine, but others are suffering both in our country and elsewhere, and it's a real
Yeah,
shame.
I was walking around Eastern North Carolina this past weekend.
Hmm.
I down there, and never been more reminded of my time in Guyana than
Really?
walking around this town in Eastern North Carolina. Yeah.
Oh my God! Just the number of people that are obviously under hardship.
People under hardship, people not productively working,
Mm-hmm.
people just obviously displaying the impact of lack of education, lack of nutrition when engaging with folks. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It was really surprising,
Mm-hmm.
and I literally was walking down the street and it was just like, and I mean, there were burned out buildings and stuff, and abandoned hotels and everything right in the downtown, and it was, and there were other pockets that were really nice, but it was really weird, and it really felt most like being in Guyana or somewhere 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
weird, just weird. We should probably
yeah.
talk about more productive things.
Well, and probably shift it back to the ag side of the house. So, talk on the ag side of the house. We just saw that there's a proposed budget for USDA for 2027, coming from the administration, which would cut about $5 billion from USDA, which is roughly 20% of what they received for fiscal year 26. What do you feel about that? How do you feel, Mr. Paul?
I mean, I'm never really in favor of government bureaucracy, right? But I
Hmm.
do, even though I worked in one for a long time, but I certainly think that there's a lot of risk there. Um, so at the same time this comes out, I'm looking at some of the discussions about forecasting the global corn crop, right?
Okay.
Where USDA's got some forecast, but then when you look at Argentina and Brazil and what locals are saying, what private sector's saying, forecasts don't jive with what USDA is saying. And so, it's one of those things that makes me think, well, USDA suffered a lot of cuts. NASA's, the statistics folks have suffered a lot of cuts there. Are they still able to provide the high quality product that they've always provided? And I think,
Mm,
yeah, a lot of them, in general, yes, but then I start to have some questions, right? Because there is such a gap that seems to be emerging, at least in the corn crop forecast, right? So you're looking
mm,
at that and thinking, okay, well, how's that going to impact the U.S.? So we have a real negative impact on U.S. growers if they don't know what the global market's going to look like, right? So you're going to
mhm.
plant corn, you're going to plant soybeans. You kind of need to know what your competitors in Argentina and Brazil are going to look like and what the global surplus is going to look like or global demand is going to look like. And you need those experts at USDA to provide that, right?
Yeah. At the end of
Or
the
you gotta do
day,
math yourself, and that's a lot of math to be mathing, right? So
well, I mean, from what I understand, farmers depend on some level of predictability. They can't
of
control the
course.
rain, they can control the temperature, they can't control what bugs are going to go through their field this year, but they can get some information from the government or others. And what, from based on what you're saying, sounds like they're not getting that. How do they make their planting decisions for 27 and 28 now when when it may be possible that USDA just doesn't have the depth of expertise and bandwidth to be able to do these calculations for them.
Yeah, I think it's a real concern, right? And so when you look at reforming USDA, I mean, you should always be looking at reforming, right? You should always be looking at making yourselves more efficient, more responsive, right? That should be an ongoing, perpetual element, right? And a lot of elements of bureaucracy do that. But just to cut, right, without a plan, I mean, we've seen what happens, right? You need to really understand what you're cutting and why. You need to understand the services you're providing, right? A lot of those ag extension agents and everybody, they provide a real service to their community, and farmers really rely on them. A lot of innovation is driven by those folks getting out and working with farmers individually to explain the positives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's it's been like that for 50, 60, 80 years, right? I mean, for a long time, and it's worked and worked well. Can always be reformed, of
Mm-hmm.
course, but I don't know how the cuts just. It seems like the cuts are often just a cut,
Well,
and
and
that's concerning.
what I'll note is during Trump 1, USDA went through a reorg where they essentially tried to streamline and make things more efficient and effective. Well, turn right around, Trump 2, they immediately do another reorg. They're trying to streamline as if that's the only way to affect change is just doing reorgs over and over and essentially trying to get rid of people. Let's be clear. A
Yeah.
lot of what happened in the last year was it's tempting to push civil servants out of positions because the administration feels that those civil servants don't serve the current leader. You and I both know that
The
that's
loyalty.
not, yeah, the
Yeah.
loyalty thing. You and I both know that's not how it worked at state. I didn't
Yeah.
care who was in the Oval Office. I had a job to do, and I was going to do it as best as I could, trying to serve the American people. And if they tell me that I have to
Right.
take a particular action, as long as it's not illegal, I'm going to be doing it, even if it's not necessarily what I think is the best path forward. Unfortunately, that's not the way that the current administration sees civil servants, and they're doing their best to shove them out. I mean, I don't know if we talked about it on a previous episode, but the current relocation, they're trying to take half of all current USDA employees in the DC area and take them to North Carolina, take them to Montana. The stated goal is to bring them closer to those farmers that they're serving, but we also know that most of those people aren't going to make the move. Their lives are in the DC area. They don't want to move hundreds or thousands of miles away. And it was explicit. It was stated that this was to cause some level of attrition.
Oh
So
yeah. Definitely.
it we are losing people. And you're talking about the extension services. Part of the